What's up? Hey, everyone. Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. It is 4 o'clock, right on the nose. That means we've got another live stream for you. We will be with you for the next hour or so. I hope that you brought your questions for our Q&A session. I've got some serious questions for you today. Hey, the chat is already very active. Before we are through today, we will have thousands of people with us from all around the world. It's a blessing to be with you. It's always a lot of fun to do our live streams, usually every Wednesday, sometimes on Thursday, depending on my schedule, travel and the like, but usually on Wednesday. So let's get rolling today. I see people already, New York City, Lancaster, PA, about an hour and a half where I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, not too far from me. And we'll have people from Europe, Asia, Africa, all over. So this is great. We've got a lot to talk about today. Just to give you a rundown on what we are going to dig into. Number one, wow, Russia really feeling the heat in Ukraine. Have you heard about this? This massive counteroffensive by Ukrainian forces has really pushed Russian forces back in the eastern region of Ukraine, around Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. And they're pushing Russian troops literally up against the Ukraine-Russia border to the point where reportedly some Russian troops are just crossing the border and going back into Russia. Ukraine has seized some 2,300 square miles, re-seized, I should say, retaken some 2,300 square miles of territory in the past week alone in what can only be described as a lightning counteroffensive. Russian forces seem taken by surprise. What does this all mean for Vladimir Putin, and what does he do next? Will he respond in a very harsh manner? What does that mean? Are we talking nuclear? We're going to talk about that today. I'll throw the question out there for you right now. Regardless of how you feel about what's going on there between Russia and Ukraine, the bottom line is, and even Kremlin officials now are saying, this is not going well, that we've been hit and hit hard and hurt in this Ukrainian counteroffensive. Regardless of how you feel about the whole situation, I know we've got varying opinions here. I read the comments. What now? What do you think? Where do you think this goes now? That's my question to you. Let's not look back and how it launched, everything else. Where are we now? And with Russia seemingly, in some ways, with its back against the wall, or at least against the border, against the Russian border, and Ukraine, again, retaking large areas of territory, clearly this Russian campaign is a failure. It's a military failure. Folks, I think that's indisputable at this point. I'm not a military strategist, but it doesn't take a genius to see that Russia has not accomplished the goals it set out to accomplish in this campaign in Ukraine, which was launched back in late February. It's been a disaster. Heavy casualties, a lot of soldiers killed, low morale. So what now? Vladimir Putin's in a tough position. What does he do now? I'd like to get your thoughts, and we're going to elaborate that on that more in a little bit. I see the Netherlands here, someone from the Netherlands. I see someone who went to Overbrook High School in Philadelphia many years ago in West Philly. I know it well. I played against Overbrook in basketball when I played ball in high school, played in college as well. But okay, Russia is one thing we want to talk about. By the way, those Iranian drones, we told you Iran is supplying Russia with attack drones. One of them was shot down over Ukraine this week. Very interesting. Russia already is putting those Iranian drones into use. Hey, before I go on, if you have not subscribed, I'm sure if you're with us, I'm pretty sure if you're with us here for a live stream that you are a subscriber. But by chance, if you have not, hey, we're close to 500,000 subscribers right now. Hard to believe, right? I mean, let's see. We hit 100,000 just not even 2 years ago. I think it was mid-October 2020. Now we're at 478,000, closing in on 500,000. And folks, we're just laughing and shaking our heads and saying, God, you have the sense of humor to expand our territory like this. This channel is by God and for God. That's how I phrase it. And if we continue to do that and do what he's given us to do, I think we'll continue to grow. So we're honored to have you with us here. And if you want to subscribe, join us on a regular basis, shoulder to shoulder, as watchmen and women on the wall. That would be great. You can click the subscribe button, also the notification bell, and give us a thumbs up if you like what you're hearing. Okay. Russia, Ukraine, we're going to talk about that. The nuclear factor, folks. What about the prophetic implications? Are there prophetic implications? What happens to Vladimir Putin? Will he be around? We've talked about, obviously, that Magog invasion as laid out in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. I believe Russia will lead that, quote, latter days invasion of Israel. Well, they won't get very far with the invasion. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But if Russia's at the head, will Vladimir Putin be at the head, or will someone else be at the head? I'm getting too much into it now. I'm going to save that for a little bit, a few minutes. But we also want to talk about the Iran nuclear deal. You might say, oh, not that again. Well, I have some potentially good news in a sense. An update. The deal right now looks like it's on life support. Now, I've never seen a more schizophrenic deal in my life. A few weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago, I sat here pretty gloomy on the newscast and said, it looks like this deal is going to happen. Folks, it looks like a done deal. Every indication out of Europe and out of Washington, D.C., courtesy of the Biden administration, was that it's going to happen. We're right there. Even Iranian officials were saying we're right there. And now it's unraveled yet again. Folks, it's been up and down like a yo-yo for the past year and a half. 1 week, hey, this thing's imminent. It's going to happen. Israel's up in arms and saying this is terrible. And the next week, hey, this thing's falling apart. It's unraveling. Bellicose statements by the Iranian regime and Israel saying it's done. It's not going to happen. Israel saying we were able to influence the West to back out. So we got to talk about that too and where that leaves us. If this thing unravels, and here's a question for you, another question. I've got a second question for you. I'd love you to, in the chat, respond. If this deal unravels, does that make it more or less likely that Israel takes military action against Iran's nuclear facilities? I've got my own thoughts on it, which I will share with you in a little bit, but whether Iran agrees to a deal or doesn't agree to a deal. If the deal is done, if it doesn't happen, does that make Israel more likely to act against Iran? Will Iran then really push forward, or will Israel say, if a deal is going to happen, we need to take this out before this deal goes into effect? What do you think? I'd like to get your thoughts, and we'll talk about that as well. Also, speaking of Russia, I forgot to mention, tomorrow, September 15th, Vladimir Putin will be meeting with, guess who? Xi Jinping, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. It is Xi's first foreign trip in 2.5 years, if you can believe it, since before COVID, which came from China. Nevertheless, he is traveling finally overseas. He will meet Putin in Uzbekistan, of all places. They will be at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, summit. This is basically an alliance of nations that stand against the West and are trying to kind of form their own thing, their own order that, again, is aligned against the West. Russia and China, obviously, at the head of that list. So they will be meeting on the sidelines of this summit tomorrow, Xi and Putin. They will be discussing Ukraine, according to reports in the run-up to this meeting. And I wonder what exactly about Ukraine they will be discussing. You have to think, we know that since Russia invaded Ukraine back in February, Xi and the Chinese Communist regime have been watching the events unfold there very, very closely. By the way, we've got a troll here named Ira Rabinowitz. Daniel, you can get him off this chat. He's saying some nasty things. I just glanced at the chat and I saw him. If anyone else wants to respond to him, go ahead. Ira Rabinowitz, which I'm sure is a false name, probably another anti-Semite. We get a few of those, sadly, and he's gone. Bye. Let's proceed. You got to know that the Chinese Communist regime has been watching this very, very closely. And for a few things, folks. Number one, how does Ukraine respond? What kind of resistance does Ukraine put up? And number two, how does the world respond, and how harsh, how severe are the consequences for Russia, the economic consequences? Okay, let's unpack that real quick. Number one, Remember, right, the last time Xi and Putin met was right before Russia invaded Ukraine. That was back in mid-February at the Beijing Olympics. They had a very warm meeting there, and they talked about publicly, they made public statements together, shoulder to shoulder. They talked about taking the China-Russia alliance to another level and deepening the relationship on all fronts, an anti-American axis. Here in the newscast, we have called it the gathering storm against America. Not only America, we have viewers from all around the world here. Against the free world, could we say? Against any nation that does not march to the drumbeat of a totalitarian regime. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran are at the forefront of what I call the gathering storm. Nonetheless, they met in February, and Xi, you have to think that Putin at least gave Xi an inkling of, hey, we're going in and we're going in soon. And you have to think that Xi gave him the blessing. And Xi probably said, hey, you know what, Vlad, a day is coming, maybe sooner than later, where we may also go into Taiwan. And we expect you, Vlad, to have our backs when we do that. Now, China has stood behind Russia throughout this Ukrainian campaign, which is about 6.5 months old now. So has the Iranian regime, so has the Syrian regime, so has North Korea, the usual suspects. But Xi, no doubt, this is a quid pro quo. He would expect, if he moves against Taiwan, Russian support. Here's the problem with that, folks, for Xi. How far does Russian support go these days? The Russian military has been exposed during this Ukraine campaign. Russia has been weakened, certainly in the eyes of the world, on the world stage. They haven't paid the economic price that you would think, because China, India is another nation. Various nations have stepped up, Latin America, some nations as well, and continue to do business with Russia and soften that blow. But certainly, Putin has weakened Russia's position in the world, where, think about it, whatever you think of Europe and whatever you think of the world, quote unquote, and the world these days is a world turned upside down where good is called evil and evil is called good. I know, don't get me wrong. I fully am aware. We talk about it every day here in the newscast. We live in perilous times, Bible times, but perilous times. Nevertheless, Putin, look, in terms of weakening Russia's position, there's no getting around it. Yes, I'm not a fan of Europe and the leadership or lack thereof in Europe. I'm far from it. Ultra-secular, depraved Europe, not a fan. But look, they have basically shut off the energy market to Russia. Putin has lost the European energy market, or is in the process of losing it. 40% of Europe's energy reserves, natural gas and oil, came from Russia before this Ukraine campaign kicked off. Now that's gone. That's done. Yes, they'll still get some. It's not going, they can't cut the cord right away. They might not have to. Putin may just cut them off. It seems like he's about to do that. I think we all know, we've been hearing about this, right? It's already mid-September practically. Winter is coming. Where have you heard that before? A long, harsh winter, potentially in Europe. And it's still an open question what exactly Europe is going to do in terms of energy, heating. Putin, they, in such a short-sighted fashion, became so reliant on him for their energy needs. And it bears repeating. You've probably seen the highlights recently. This clip has been highlighted pretty frequently. I think it was 2018 at the UN. Former President Trump stood before the UN. He particularly singled out Germany and the German delegation. And he said, Germany, if you're not careful, you're going to become completely dependent on Russian oil and gas. And it's going to put you in a horrible position. You're going to be reliant on Vladimir Putin. And you may have seen this highlight. If you haven't, just do an internet search. You can find it. The German delegation, folks, literally laughed. They slapped their knees. They looked at each other and said, this guy's crazy. Do you believe this guy? The nerve of this guy. Fast forward now 4 years. They're not laughing anymore. Vladimir Putin literally has Germany over a barrel. Jonathan Rivera, just saw this real quick. Welcome, Jonathan. We have a new Watchman Premium member, Jonathan Rivera. Hey, thanks so much, Jonathan, for joining with us. You can subscribe, of course, folks, but if you want to become a premium member, that'd be great as well. You can just click join on the homepage, and you can be with us and get some extra perks, I guess you would say. The exclusive first look at every brand new episode of The Watchmen before it hits the air every week with some behind the scenes commentary. Also, we did one, we're planning more. I'm on the road this week, but we're planning more when I get back. Premium member live streams, and $4.99 a month. The bottom line is you help keep us on the air. You help keep this channel going. That's the main thing. We appreciate your support as premium members. If you're not a premium member, don't worry. You still watch us here every day, but we'd love to have you join us as a premium member as well, if you can, and if the Lord leads you in that direction. Okay, what direction are we going in now? We want to talk about also this Hamas Islamic Jihad. I can only call it a bounty against Israelis, where they are going to pay for terrorists to kill Israelis and then apparently broadcast it on the TikTok social media app, speaking of China. So we want to talk about that as well. We've got a lot to talk about. Someone says here, Guy Viola, one of our commenters, could it be a September to remember? Good question, Guy. A lot of people have been saying that. We're already practically at mid-September, right? It's September 14th. And many people, a few things. Number one, we have the UN General Assembly coming up. Number two, we have obviously the Jewish high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then in October, we'll have Sukkot, also known as the Feast of Tabernacles, in rapid succession. The high holidays are coming. They're at the doorstep. What do you think? That's a great question that Guy just posed. Do you think this September, we have 16 days left in this month, is this going to be a September to remember? Is it going to be September to remember for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? Will it be a September to remember in all the wrong ways? Let me know what you think. And it could be a November to remember, right? We have the midterm elections here in the US. November 1st, we have the Israeli election. Is that the fourth in the past 3.5 years, I believe? I believe it's the fourth or even the fifth. I should know this more than anyone, and even I'm losing track. That tells you something. It's here the fourth or fifth Israeli election in the past under 3 years. Wow. You know, people say, oh, Israel's critics say, oh, Israel's a dictatorship. It's a totalitarian fascist regime. And yet they seem to love having free and fair elections every few months. Seems to be the opposite of totalitarianism and fascism to me, but I digress. Let's break down Russia real quick. So we got a few things to hit on. What are your thoughts on, number one, what does Putin do next? Number two, what are the prophetic implications? I'll give you my thoughts real quick. A penny for my thoughts. I think Putin is in a very precarious position right now. That goes without saying. And folks, look, Ukraine is literally, I mean, according to all reports on the ground, and even Russian officials now are saying, Ukrainian forces, no doubt using some of that Western military hardware, are pushing Russian forces, again, up against the border to the point where some Russian forces reportedly have been seen fleeing over the border back into Russia. This is not going well. You can spin it however you want, and we'll have some pro-Putin propagandist, I'm sure, spin it and try and spin it and tell me that Vladimir Putin, who's aligned with Iran, China, and North Korea, perhaps the three biggest persecutors of Christians in the world, and yet we'll have some people say, no, he's a defender, Putin, of Christianity and Western civilization. Funny how that works. You can tell a lot about a man by the company he keeps. And the company Vladimir Putin keeps includes the world's worst enemies of Christianity, no doubt. And the world's number one enemy of the Jewish state, the state of Israel, the Iranian regime. These are Putin's friends, and you can't get around that, folks. Try to explain that away. The great defender of Christianity and Western civilization, I don't think that can be explained away. I'd love for someone to try. Please explain to me how you can be a defender of Christianity and yet align yourself with people who are slaughtering Christians and Jews. You can't get around it. Let's move on. What does he do now? This evil man, who is reportedly in poor health. He is 70 years old. There's been reports of cancer, that he's received cancer treatments. Folks, look, Russia is not like a Western country where he just gets voted out or perhaps he resigns. No, he's there till the bitter end. What does the bitter end look like? Is it a palace coup? Is it a military coup? Is Vladimir Putin ushered out, overthrown, thrown in prison, even killed? It's an option. Although he's been a strong man, it's an option. Secondly, does Putin and his inner circle, do they close ranks, and does his inner circle back him and harden around him and prop him up even more? And along those lines, does he do something drastic? And when I'm talking drastic, what do you think I mean? You've heard the rumblings, folks. The nuclear option. Does Vladimir Putin use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine? Or does he spark perhaps a nuclear crisis in hitting a Ukrainian nuclear facility? Hey, we've had fighting between Russian and Ukrainian forces near Ukrainian nuclear facilities. We've had it. In an quote accident, unquote, does Russia hit one of these nuclear facilities and spark a crisis? Another Chernobyl, God forbid, in that sense. Putin knows, folks, it's all or nothing. Hear me clearly, and I think you know this. If you're watching us, watching the live stream, you get it. You know what's going on. This is not how it ends. This is not going to end with Vladimir Putin saying, hey, let's just sign a peace treaty now, a ceasefire. We will withdraw back to Russia. Maybe we'll keep some of those eastern territories in eastern Ukraine, but we will withdraw. Let's sign a peace treaty, and we'll go about our merry business and back to business as usual, back to normal. That's not going to happen. The Russian regime will not accept that. That's not going to happen, because that would mean an utter and a total defeat and a disgrace for Russia. They're not going to permit that to happen. And Vladimir Putin's not going to go that route, because if he goes that route, he's done. He's most likely done, one way or the other. More likely, and judging by Russian history as well, he's going to go all out. And look, he has not unleashed the full might of the Russian military, which, yes, I know has its flaws and is not the most modern in some senses military. And certainly morale is very low right now. But Putin has not unleashed the full might of the Russian military yet. He has held back to a degree. He hasn't gone on a complete carpet bombing campaign of civilian areas, although civilians have been slaughtered, no doubt. There's blood on his hands, civilian blood on his hands. He hasn't gone all in with a full-scale, wide-scale bombing of civilian targets. And I hope he never does. I think we all agree to that. But he's got that card to play. Diane Atwood says, one of our commenters, I don't think at this point Russia can back down. Diane, I agree with you. It's all or nothing. So either he's going to go all in, and is he going to call up more soldiers and have a draft? I don't think so. Morale's already low, or perhaps he does. Perhaps he mobilizes like Russia mobilized against Nazi Germany when Nazi Germany invaded Russia. I think if you see Ukrainian troops, and I don't know if Ukrainian soldiers would be that bold, but what if Ukraine has an incursion into Russia? What if they press and cross over the border into Russia, into Western Russia? Talk about a game changer there. If that were to happen, I would find that perhaps unlikely. But hey, has this war gone as you expected back in February when it launched? I think most observers thought, well, it's going to go like Crimea did back in 2014. Russia's going to make short work of them, and Ukraine will fight valiantly, but Russia will just have too much. They'll overwhelm Ukraine. It hasn't gone that way. So I don't think anyone can predict right now what's going to happen. But I will tell you, Vladimir Putin is increasingly getting to the point where his back is against the wall and his survival may be at stake. And folks, if he's cornered, a wounded animal, what's he going to do? I don't think we can discount that. And I think Many in the West, many Western leaders are very short-sighted and not taking this seriously enough and not realizing we are entering uncharted waters here. And who knows where he's going to go? And we'll leave it at that. And I don't think any of us knows, but I think in the West, they may want to take this seriously and at least consider the possibility that he may take drastic measures, unprecedented measures. And I don't know if the West is prepared for that, for the fallout, literally the fallout from that, God forbid. But talk about the nuclear factor, folks. Not only Russia, but China in the midst of a massive nuclear buildup. The largest military and nuclear buildup by a nation since World War II, China is undergoing right now. Of course, Iran, salivating to have the bomb, and North Korea has the bomb. Now, North Korea apparently not yet does it have intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, but they are working diligently, no doubt, to acquire those. And by the way, North Korea is very willing to share nuclear and missile technology, and Iran has been one of the great beneficiaries of that. Iran also, according to the US Pentagon and other intelligence services, has been working over the years to develop those intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. You might say, what's an ICBM? Why is that so important? ICBMs do exactly what their name says. They're designed to travel across continents and across oceans. Folks, those ICBMs are not for Israel, not for Saudi Arabia. They're not even for Europe. Ultimately, those ICBMs, whether they're North Korean or Iranian, are for the United States. You develop ICBMs for one reason and one reason only, to mount them with a nuclear warhead. That's the sole rationale for developing them. Again, those ICBMs are for the United States. So if you're sitting in the United States like I am and you're saying, well, you know, it's interesting what he's talking about, but it doesn't really affect me. That's all the way over there in the Middle East, or it's in Asia, or it's in Europe. Time to wake up. You know, I love my country. I love my fellow Americans, but sometimes we get tunnel vision here. And if it's not in our backyard, we don't care about it. If it doesn't affect me, big deal. Well, for starters, what happens in the Middle East, you've heard me say this many times, does not stay in the Middle East. And that's just for starters. And I believe what's unfolding in Europe right now, the Russia-Ukraine war, and certainly what's happening in the Pacific with China, the entire world is going to feel that reverberate, folks. It's not going to be just a regional conflict. We're past the point of that. You know, it was fascinating to me back in February when Russia invaded Ukraine. There was a European Union official, I forget who it was, but he said something to the effect of, this is 2022. How can this happen? We're in modern times. We're in the 21st century. Nation states don't invade other nation states anymore. This is passé. This is so out of style. It's so 20th century. Well, get ready, because these are birth pangs and these are wars and rumors of wars. But sadly, the Bible says there's more to come. But you don't have to be discouraged about that, because you've put your trust, your faith in the rock, the Lord Jesus, or at least I hope you have. If you haven't, do it today, because I do believe time is short. I don't have a timetable, but what do you define as short? Is 30 years short? 40 years short? Pretty short, right? To me, the Bible says a day is like 1,000 years to God. That's nothing on his timetable. So if you have not put your faith in the Lord Jesus yet, I strongly encourage you to do it. And put aside the childish ways and the destructive ways and get right with God now, folks. It's not scare tactics or sensationalism or alarmism. And you're not watching this right now by accident or coincidence. I can assure you of that. This is the time. Don't put it off and say, well, I'm not quite ready yet. I'll do it maybe in like a year. Once I get my house in order, I have to fix a few things. Then I can get serious about God and maybe go back to church and start praying again. I wouldn't put it off another day. We live in the most unpredictable times that any of us, I think, have seen, right? 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, would you have predicted a global lockdown and the COVID pandemic and all the things that have happened in the past 2.5 years. Where do we begin with that, right? Of course not. Of course not. And would you have predicted what's unfolding here in my backyard in the United States? And so things are happening at a very rapid clip. It is very, very hard to keep up with. So don't be behind the curve, meaning don't be in a bad place in your relationship with the Lord. Be when he assesses your life, and you'll stand before him, we all will. I just pray that he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. That should be your goal, to just do it for the Lord and do everything you can. You know, Jesus never said, until I return, you just sit there on the couch and you wait for me. That's not how it works. We're expected to be about the Father's business for as long as we're here. Maybe we'll be here another 100, maybe another 1,000 years, but the way the prophetic chess pieces are moving on the board, it feels to me, and I'm sure it feels to many watching, time is short and getting shorter. Speaking of China, I mentioned Taiwan earlier and shortened time. Before Afghanistan and before Russia and Ukraine, and I promise we'll get to Iran, more Middle East, we'll get to Iran and that terrorist bounty against Israel that I mentioned at the top. Another troll, Mohammed Abbasi, Daniel, we can delete him as well. Interesting. They must monitor the channel and say he's going live at 4 o'clock. I'm going to hop in there and I'm going to make some comments. Oh my gosh, what an amazing performance. Bye, Mohammed. Anyway, to the thousands watching who are our brothers and sisters, watchmen and women on the wall, sorry about that. The reason I call a troll out here and there is because I don't want you to be harassed, because we have people who are sincerely here, who are enjoying the live stream and want to ask questions and learn and have give and take with some fellow watchmen and women on the wall. You don't need these clowns. Yeah, I said it. Harassing you during the chat. That's not what you're here for. Not on my channel. We'll draw the line there. It ain't happening. Anyway, I believe that before the Biden administration and before the Afghanistan debacle and before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that China's timetable for invading Taiwan, perhaps it was 2026, perhaps it was 2025, perhaps even 2027. You have to believe, after what we've seen in the past just under 2 years here in the United States, that China is saying, or at least strongly considering, sitting back and saying, you know what, Biden's weak. And Russia paid a price, but not, I mean, it's not a depression in Russia and a complete famine. They're still up and running. Their economy is still functioning despite sanctions. Yes, the Russian military has not performed well, but that's a separate issue. You have to think between weakness in Washington, D.C., and seeing, okay, Russia, it survived economically. It's a struggle right now, I know, but they didn't completely collapse. You don't have people starving in the streets, and maybe that'll come. I don't know. But up until now, despite heavy sanctions from the West, it hasn't happened. Others have stepped into the gap and helped prop Putin up and prop Russia up. You got to think on those 2 points. China is saying, why wait? America's not going to do anything. Xi might say, they're all bluster. Look at what happened in Afghanistan. What a debacle. Look at what happened with Russia. Putin went in, nothing really happened to him. It's not like he faced a military option from the United States. You got to think that Xi is saying, we have this window until 2024. Why not take advantage of it now, between now and 2024? He may say things could change. Come 2024, there could be a new president in Washington, D.C. We have no idea. 2 years, a long time. We don't even know what's going to happen in 2 months during these midterms. 2 years, long time. It's an eternity when it comes to all the madness going on right now and everything prophetically, everything unfolding. And as we mentioned earlier, things are completely unpredictable. If you're Xi, you could say, let's do it now. Let's take advantage now. Because in 2024, what if a Trump or a DeSantis gets into office? It's a different story. China would be held accountable, and they know it. Are they real? Okay, they'll be sanctioned for sure. Could there be a dust up in the Pacific? Yes, there could be. Could American and Chinese navies engage? Yes. But it would be a limited war. You have to think that China knows this would not, and certainly the Biden administration would want to keep it contained to the Pacific and keep it short. The bottom line, what I'm saying is this, that China is weighing the costs and the benefits right now of moving sooner rather than later against Taiwan. That's what I'm saying. What do you think? If you're Xi, do you say, you know what? We can get away with this now and we won't face heavy consequences. But after 2024, all bets are off the table. We don't know what's going to happen then. Seems to make sense. I hate to say it, but if you're China, it would seem to make sense to be having that conversation right now. We have an interesting comment here. Let's see. A few. Okay, we'll save those. We'll save those for the Q&A, which is coming up in a few minutes. But I like what I'm seeing. We got some good give and take and some good comments here coming on the chat, which I'm monitoring. We've got a few thousand people with us. Very nice. Good segue into our Q&A in 5 minutes. Let's talk a little Iran and a little bit of this terrorist bounty. I think that's the only way we can describe it. I'm going to pull up this article from today from Politico, a left-wing publication, but nonetheless, I'm going to use it. It is titled, Iran, just reading this off my phone, by the way, that's why I'm looking down. Iran nuclear talks head into deep freeze ahead of the midterms. The negotiations to restore the nuclear deal Trump shattered, thankfully, look to be heading in a good direction. But new demands from Tehran have put it on ice. It goes on to say, the Iran nuclear talks are stalling out again. Only a few short weeks ago, European diplomats were waltzing through the streets, I'm sure they were, of the Austrian capital, optimistic that 16 months of negotiations to revive the Iran nuclear deal had finally achieved the breakthrough. And yes, we reported it here in the newscast. We said, here it goes, we're there. But an Iranian tough line and reports of new uranium enrichment to near weapon levels, I'm shocked, have shattered hopes here that a deal will soon be reconstructed. Engagement with Iran is not at the point that I would really like to see, said the UN nuclear watchdog's chief. There's such disappointment across the board. We wanted this deal so badly, but Iran just won't play ball. Why can't they just cooperate? Why can't they just be nice? We'll give them whatever they want. That's what Western leaders are saying, not me. Don't they know that we're ready to appease them by any means necessary? We just want this problem to go away. I'm getting inside the heads of Western leaders like Biden and European leaders. We just want this problem to go away. And we will give you anything, Iranian regime, to make it go away. Please don't hurt us. Is that the way you're reading the situation, folks? Because that's certainly the way I'm reading it. The West says, or what used to be known as the West, Western so-called leaders say to the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, we'll give you whatever you want. $100 billion a year in sanctions relief, which you can use to build more weapons and funnel the terror groups. Check, done. Not discussing your ballistic missile program, including those ICBMs that I discussed earlier here in a live stream. Check, done. We won't even bring the missiles up. Not requiring, not demanding that you cut your support for the likes of Islamic Jihad, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, etc. Check, done. This is what passes for Western leadership today. And guess what? Iran is playing even more hardball now. And you have to think that Russia, look, with these Iran talks, we've been talking, obviously, the US, Britain, France, Germany, in Vienna. Remember, Russia and China are also a party to these talks, and Russia has played the role, at least before they were. Are they still? I'm not quite sure. But even after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia was basically in the intermediary role, playing the go-between between Iran and the U.S. Remember, the U.S. is not face-to-face with Iran in these talks. The talks with the U.S. delegation are indirect. Iran literally is not allowing American Biden administration negotiators into the room. They'll negotiate face-to-face with Britain, France, Germany, China, Russia, but not the United States. And the United States is going to take that. And instead of walking away and saying, we're out of here, this is a joke, they're going to take that and they're going to stay in the talks. Literally, nothing Iran does, it seems, will kill these talks. I mean, Iran has plotted assassinations of former Trump administration officials on U.S. soil, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton. We've talked about this on the newscast. They've continued to lob rockets and attack drones at U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. They've continued to instigate terror throughout the Middle East. Nothing the Iranian regime does, quite literally, seemingly, will make the West walk away. It seems the only thing that will really, no pun intended, torpedo this Iran nuclear deal is if Iran says we're walking away and that's that. Iranian terror, Iranian weapons development, Iranian missile bases in Syria at Israel's doorstep, assassination plots. Again, none of that has made the West say, this is a joke. We're walking away. We're not doing business with these people. The only thing that will kill the deal is Iran itself. And you have to think that Russia, remember I said Russia, China, they're also in the room, they're involved in this. You have to think that behind the scenes, Russia, and remember, Russia and Iran closely aligned. Can you say Ezekiel 38:39, Gog, Magog, Persia, which is modern day Iran? Putin was in Iran back in July, meeting with the supreme leader Khamenei and Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi. You have to think that Russia and China, behind the scenes, are telling Iran, no, don't sign the deal yet. Drag it out some more. Squeeze every last painful, embarrassing concession that you can out of the United States, out of Europe. Make their lives miserable. Make it almost like, have you watched Peanuts, Charlie Brown? Anyone in the United States, the Charlie Brown cartoons? I love them at Christmas, Thanksgiving, where Lucy has the football and Charlie Brown goes to kick it and she moves the football and he falls on his butt. And it happens time after time again. And poor Charlie Brown never gets the memo. And he continues to do it. He continues to trust Lucy. And then she moves the football anyway. The West is Charlie Brown. And the Iranian regime in this scenario is Lucy. And Iran is dangling the Iran deal and saying, we're going to do it. Well, yeah, okay, we can work it out. And then just when they're ready to sign a deal, Iran says, yeah, you know what? We changed our mind. Now we want X, Y, and Z too. And there's the West falling flat on its back, missing the kick. That's where we're at. But you got to think that Russia and China are telling them, hey, make this as painful as possible. Drag it out as long as you can. Give them false hope and then drag it out some more. And that's what you see. Now, I may come here on next week's live stream and say, hey, guess what, folks? Update. Now they're saying it's imminent again. The Charlie Brown deal. We have to think of a clever nickname. Does anyone have one for the Charlie Brown? The Charlie Brown deal. But now it's imminent again. And then I'll come back to you in 2 weeks and say, oh, it's not imminent anymore. Iran stepped back again. Now Europe and the US say maybe not. This is a charade. It's a joke. Folks, this is blackmail. It's extortion on the part of the Iranian regime. They're saying, give us what we want, or we will continue to attack U.S. soldiers, and we may instigate a war against Israel. Oh, yeah, and we'll build the bomb. This is blackmail. And it's extortion, extorting money from the West, and it's working. It's clearly blackmail and extortion, and it's working. How sad, how pathetic. And you got to think that this is worse even than Neville Chamberlain. in World War II when it comes to the level of appeasement, because we've seen this script already. In 2015, we saw the Iran deal. We saw the first incarnation of it. What did they do? They took those billions of dollars in sanctions relief and they used it to build up their terror proxies and expand their reach across the region and expand their missile program. This is not brain surgery. So we know how it's going to go. That's why it's worse, because we know how it's going to go. Yet we're going to do it again. And Iran is much stronger than they were 7 years ago. Dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. One thing I want to mention, we got questions here. I do want to mention one thing, the terror bounty. I just want to read this and give me your thoughts on this. By the way, an IDF officer, an Israel defense officer, was killed today in Judea and Samaria, which the world calls the West Bank. We call it Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland. Killed, apparently, I'm just reading here, by a member of the Palestinian Authority security forces. Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid is saying this is an escalation. So we're keeping an eye on that. And the U.S., the Biden administration is, quote, unquote, concerned with escalating violence in the West Bank. Again, Judea and Samaria, we call it. They're concerned. What are they concerned about? Concerned about terror there or concerned about Israel? That's a big question when it comes to this administration. Here's the last thing I wanted to mention, and we got questions. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, Iranian proxies both, are said to offer $200 per shooting attack if the terrorists post the video of the attack. The two groups are offering about $200. This is from the Times of Israel, by the way. The two groups are offering about $200 for a shooting in an effort to encourage more attacks, in particular as Israel enters its 3-week high holiday period, which begins with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, next week. Videos must be published on the TikTok video sharing app in order to qualify for a payout from Hamas or Islamic Jihad, according to the report. Folks, we live in wicked times when wicked men are running amok. And that's the only way I can respond to that. So keep Israel in your prayers. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. You have a biblical mandate to do exactly that. That's non-negotiable in the eyes of God Almighty. Pray for peace. Pray for God's shalom in the land of Israel as these high holidays approach. Because clearly you have evil men with evil intentions. And the Temple Mount is always the epicenter of it, and stirring things up there, the likes of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. So someone said, will this be a September to remember? I said, will it be a September to remember in all the wrong ways? We may be about to find out, but we hope for a non-eventful remainder of this month. Let's continue to pray for that in Israel and around the world. Okay, here we go. Question time. And we've got some good ones here. Let's see, just pulling them up. Someone asked, do you think Israel, I didn't catch his name, I apologize, but I saw a fleeting glimpse. Someone asked, do you think Israel will go to war with Lebanon? Yes. Let me rephrase it, though. I believe Israel will go to war with Hezbollah, but that Lebanon, the nation of Lebanon, sadly, will get pulled in collectively. What do I mean by that? Hezbollah is the strongest force in Lebanon, certainly the strongest fighting force, stronger than the Lebanese state military. Hezbollah controls all of southern Lebanon with an iron fist. Hezbollah has a very strong presence in the suburbs around the Lebanese capital of Beirut. Hezbollah has some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel, some 40,000 well-trained foot soldiers, backing by Iran. This is a formidable force. Eventually, Israel will face off with them. It's an untenable situation. It's not sustainable for Israel to have an entity like that on its northern border committed to Israel's destruction. It's not sustainable. Israel eventually is going to have to eliminate Hezbollah as an existential threat and decisively defeat that terrorist paramilitary organization. There's no way around it. That said, Israeli officials have made clear that all of Lebanon will be held accountable because Hezbollah is there in southern Lebanon and in Beirut under the purview of the Lebanese government, which has no relations with Israel, by the way. Lebanon and Israel have no relations. And Lebanon, in Israel's view, is allowing this. They're allowing Hezbollah to set up shop there. So it's a very good bet that this war against Hezbollah is going to expand. It's not going to just include Hezbollah strongholds, put it that way. Two more things to keep in mind on that point, then we move on to the next question. An Israeli official said yesterday, I forget who it was, but I saw this come across the wire. It may have been a new top military official, I believe, who said that Israel and Lebanon would have peace right now. I mentioned a minute ago, they don't have relations. This Israeli official said they would have relations if not for Hezbollah. And folks, I believe that's true. If not for Hezbollah and the dastardly influence of the Iranian regime, Israel and Lebanon, the state of Lebanon, may very well have relations. Unfortunately, Hezbollah, as long as it exists, will never let that happen. But it could happen. And Beirut, before the Lebanese Civil War, of course, in the 1970s and 80s, and continued unrest today, obviously, Beirut was, some called it the Switzerland of the Mediterranean, a beautiful, beautiful city. And it's just very sad to see what terrorists and nefarious actors have done to Lebanon. You had Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian factions that he controlled were once used southern Lebanon as a stronghold. Now Hezbollah, now the Iranian regime. It's just sad to see what happened. I pray that the situation in Lebanon changes, but in the near term, that does not look likely. And one last thing, in terms of that war, what could be the trigger, and we're talking about September, the significance of this month, that Karish natural gas field that Israel controls off the coast of Haifa in the Mediterranean, that is scheduled to go online this month. Israel is going to start excavating natural gas from there and exporting it. And Hezbollah says if Israel does that, it means war. We shall see. We're watching it very closely. Okay, let's get through some more questions here. Robert Jones asks, why doesn't North Korea give nuclear technology to Iran if Russia and China are such great friends? North Korea has given nuclear technology, Robert, to Iran, no doubt. And there have been Iranian scientists and nuclear, I don't want to say workers, but nuclear experts present at North Korean nuclear tests in North Korea. So yes, there's been a free flow and exchange of information there. Now, North Korea has not given Iran a fully intact bomb, but certainly they have given them technology, no doubt, and helped Iran along in the process. What else do we have here? What else do we have? Let's see. Just scrolling down here. Jeremy asks a kind of unrelated question, but I think you all might find interesting, who I believe is a premium member. Jeremy, thank you. Appreciate it. Hello, Eric. I'm looking into buying an Artza box and was wondering if you still have any promotional codes to use for that. I want to help fulfill the biblical duty of blessing Israel. Jeremy, soon we will have a new Artza box offer. If you watch us, you know we don't partner with many organizations. I'm very, very picky. But when I find an organization that I believe in, okay, let's do it. Let's partner together. I believe in what you're doing. You're blessing Israel. That's a good thing. So if I find organizations like that, I will support them. And Artza is one of them. You can check them out at artzabox.com. That's A-R-T-Z-A box.com. They've got these great boxes from the Holy Land with products, I should say, made in Israel by Israeli small businesses. Really cool, top-notch stuff. And you're blessing the Israeli economy, which means you're blessing Israel. So that's a very, very cool company, Artza, artzabox.com. And we will have a new Artza box offer soon. Thanks for asking that, Jeremy. Let's see what else we have here. Just looking, guys. Apologies. We've got a bunch of questions. I'm just scrolling through. This is good. The more questions, the better. William Martin This is a good question. This is a really good question. He says, my question is, if Russia left Afghanistan, is that 1989, I believe? Why won't they get tired and leave Ukraine? Well, two completely different theaters, and the stakes are so much higher today on a lot of levels. A few things to consider, and William, great question. During the 1980s, especially the late 80s, the Soviet Union was on the decline. This was the waning days of the Cold War, on the decline, thanks to largely to Ronald Reagan taking on the Soviet empire, the evil empire, as he rightly called it, through a policy of peace through strength, working closely with Margaret Thatcher, of course. So that was one thing. Look, the wall fell in 89, right? The Berlin Wall fell in 1989, and the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. So, number one, this was a dying empire when they withdrew from Afghanistan. It was in the waning days. That's number one. Number two, Afghanistan, obviously, very obviously close to Russia, very close, but not as much of a significant player on the world stage as Ukraine is. What do I mean by that? Ukraine is a massive exporter of wheat and grain and sunflower oil and other natural resources. Ukraine also has a pretty formidable military, as we've seen. So, and it's a gateway to Russia for Europe, and a lot of obviously economic interest in Europe for Russia. So in that sense, Ukraine much more important to Russia's destiny and Russia's well-being, you could say. So there's a few factors there why Russia would not up and leave Ukraine like it did in Afghanistan. Also different leader, right? Mikhail Gorbachev at that point, paper tiger. Vladimir Putin, this could be literally life or death for him. If he leaves, he might not only be out of a job, he might be a goner. That's how it works over there. So that's another factor to consider. I think he would be, if Russia were to leave Ukraine with nothing to show for it, in his view, and either just leave or sign some kind of peace treaty, he's done. Vladimir Putin has spent the past 23 years in power projecting an image of strength. Everything from the shirtless photos where he's riding a horse or like wrestling a bear in Siberia with no shirt on. He has spent the last 23 years building up this image as a strong man. He had all the bluster in the world in the run-up to the invasion of Ukraine. And now all of a sudden, he's going to crawl away with his tail between his legs back to Russia with nothing to show for Ukraine other than tens of thousands of dead young Russian men and Russian international prestige completely dented and the Russian military exposed. He can't do it. It's do or die for him. He's all in. He can't do it. He is all in here. I don't know what his next move is. I'm very, very concerned about it. But folks, he's all in here. He's all in. I don't see him walking away. Last question here from Dylan Fulton. Where will Saudi Arabia be involved in the war of Gog and Magog? Ezekiel 38 and 39, if you haven't read it, do your homework tonight, check it out. Saudi Arabia, I believe, is among the merchants of Sheba and Dedan that Ezekiel mentions who protest. They protest this invasion by Russia, Iran, Turkey, I believe, will be in there, other former Soviet republics, some other Islamic nations. Libya is named. And it says that the young lions of Tarshish, which I believe could very well represent the U.S. and Great Britain, and the merchants of Sheba and Dedan, you're talking the Arabian Gulf, Persian Gulf nations like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, the Abraham Accords nations, they protest and they say, why are you doing this? But they seemingly do not step up and get involved militarily. They protest, and I'm sure there'll be many UN resolutions against this Ezekiel invasion force. But when the rubber hits the road, Israel is on its own, except for the ultimate equalizer, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who intervenes in a way that he hasn't in the affairs of men for the whole world to see in 2,000 years. That day is coming. And a new newscast is coming tomorrow. Until then, we got to wrap it up today. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.